Hey guys, welcome and welcome back. Today is the day we are finally at the final hiatus of Steven Universe, or Steven Universe Future. The show itself is about to end as we know it by the end of the month. We still have a few weeks to go, but today, before the premiere tonight, for the final hiatus, showdown or whatever, we are going to recap all 10 episodes of Steven Universe Future so far in the first half of the season. Are you guys ready? Leave your comments below, your favorite gem, your favorite episode of Steven Universe Future so far. Alright, so obviously we're going to start with the first episode, Little Homeschool. So, I took some notes. We gotta be serious about this. So this is where Little Homeschool is established. We go through, we learn some of the things that Steven and some of the other characters have gone through that we may not have known. Obviously, some small stuff. It's a lot of stuff that we already know, but if anybody that needs a little reminder, a little catch up, kind of like this recap. So we go through, we find out what's going on with some of the other characters. We find out that there's one gem that Steven still wants to help that refuses to show up to Little Homeschool. And of course, that's going to be Jasper. Still got to have some kind of conflict going on before we get to some more of the meat of the conflict of the series. Steven's dealing with Jasper, goes out to find Jasper, wants Jasper to feel welcomed and part of the group, but Jasper takes everything the wrong way, assumes that this is something that Steven's trying to do because he went out of his way to help her, and she never asked for his help whenever she was corrupted, and at the end of the series, and he ended up trying to help all of the corrupted gems, or as many as he could, and we've seen as the show progresses that there are so many corrupted gems they can only go through and heal a smaller amount at a time. You can't just heal all of the corrupted gems at once because that would be super hectic. And Steven ends up fighting Jasper. By the end of the fight, Steven realizes that not everyone wants or needs his help, and sometimes he still needs help from other people. And that's going to be a theme, is Steven needing help from other people a lot as we go on through the season of Steven Universe Future. Alright, so we got episode 2, Guidance, which is going to be like an Amethyst episode. A lot of it has to deal with what Amethyst has been doing at Little Homeschool and beyond. So Amethyst started placing gems with human jobs. Of course, if the gems are going to be coming to Earth and learning how to be Earthlings, and they're not going to be doing all the stuff that they used to do on Homeworld, they need to go through and find jobs that they could do on Earth. So she starts placing them at their jobs, but they're very similar to the jobs they used to have on Homeworld. And Steven thinks that this is not a great idea, and he tries to help by finding new jobs and pushing the gems out of their comfort zones, because he's grown up doing a lot of getting out of his comfort zones, and he feels like that's something that he feels like he needs to just push everybody out of their comfort zones. But as Amethyst says in the episode, comfortable can be good too. You don't always have to be pushing people outside of their boundaries that they're comfortable with. And that leads to everything going terribly wrong. The Rubies were guards because they're Ruby soldiers, Ruby guards. Steven didn't think that'd be a good idea, so he appointed a Ruby guard as like a florist, and she was going around and just beating people up and giving them flowers and taking their money, and it's not exactly the kind of job that they would have. Amethyst put 2 Ruby guards as the mayor's bodyguards, and that worked out perfect. So we have everything going wrong. Amethyst goes through, or Steven goes through and apologizes to Amethyst about interfering and trying to change everything that she had done, because of course what she was doing was fairly good. And Steven just thinks that he needs to help everyone, no matter if they need his help or not. He's just going to go help these people. So he goes through, apologizes to Amethyst. Of course, everything's going hectic, so they form Smoky Quartz. Smoky Quartz is saving everybody. There's an issue with the roller coaster, and Steven's gem activates a new power. Smoky turns pink as Steven's powers kind of take over him. And there's this ability where they're going so fast that everything's essentially slowed down around them. But it only lasts for a very short period of time, just long enough to save everybody on the roller coaster. And sometimes you can save everybody, but the roller coaster still ends up in the ocean, and that's okay. And Steven shows the first signs that he's very lost without helping people. Even though he's working at a little homeschool, he's still having some issues with that whole situation. Alright guys, we're on to episode 3, Rosebuds. So, this episode, a tad bit ridiculous. Not in like a bad way, but it's a lot for a lot of people to deal with these rose quartzes showing up out of nowhere, essentially. But, let's get into what I have down here, and we'll talk about it. So, what was Pink's zoo, which had the humans, mostly humans, and the Famethysts that were a part of that ran Pink's zoo, that the other diamonds ended up running after Pink's shattering. The humans took over the ship now that we're in Era 3, and they turned the zoo ship into a cruise ship. Haha, great joke that they made in the episode. The actual rose quartzes now, since we're in Era 3, were unbubbled and were allowed to reform now that Pink, created the rose quartzes so she could disguise herself as a rose quartz. And that's what got them bubbled in the first place, is just by being rose quartzes and looking like Rose. But, the rose quartzes, they look like Rose. They look like Steven's mother. So Steven's dealing with that, along with the other gems who also are very, distraught and think it's fairly weird that these rose quartzes are showing up essentially out of nowhere. They're the ones that got the humans to take Pink's zoo to Earth in the first place to go meet Steven. And they play it up like, they're very happy to see him, and that they want him to be around, but they were created by Pink Diamond not the same way, but in a sense like Steven was. So Steven eventually realizes that he needs to think of them not as his mother, but more of like they're siblings, essentially. They're his sisters that he's never gotten a chance to meet. They just happen to look a lot like his mother. Watching Greg come in during the dinner scene where we have the rose quartzes eating dinner, Greg comes in to talk to Steven. He sees the roses. He's gone. Says, "You want to join for dinner?" Nope, out. Gotta go. It'd be a very traumatizing thing to deal with, I can assume. Your love of your life / mother of your son, doppelgangers essentially show up out of nowhere, and everybody has got hard feelings that it's difficult for, I was going to say it's hard. They got hard feelings, it's hard for them to get over, but they got hard feelings that's difficult for them to deal with, and that none of them have completely had the chance to fully process yet. And even Steven, who thinks that he's processed these feelings, he's really just continuously bottling more things up inside, and it's very unfortunate. On to the next episode. Alright, episode 4, on to Volleyball. And as you may have noticed, the notes and the recaps for each episode may be getting a tad bit longer as the season progresses, depending on the episode. There's one episode in here that's got some smaller notes because it doesn't contain as much. But volleyball, let me tell you about volleyball. Volleyball's got a lot going on. As the nickname of the new nickname of the original Pink's Pearl. But let's get into it. So we start with Steven using his powers to heal gems as Dr. Steven Universe. And Pink's Pearl shows up. She wants to be fixed because she's got the huge crack that covers up one of her eyes. So we find out from Pink Diamond at this point, when Steven questions her, wondering if White had done it to her, she says that no. It says this was something that was done by Pink, as we start to learn that Pink had some destructive powers and liked to throw tantrums, showing herself being like the youngest of the Diamonds. Steven is unable to heal the injury and turns pink when he hears about his mother when she's brought up. It's I guess him turning pink is, I'm not sure if it's like Pink Steven showing himself or it's just his emotions kind of showing that they're right there on his sleeve, essentially. Steven, they go to Pearl for help. Steven gives Pink Pearl the nickname Volleyball, as we said earlier, and he gets upset when he is told that he is just like Rose / Pink Diamond when he's given her silly nicknames, because Pink just gave silly nicknames to every little thing. Oh my goodness. So, Steven, he knows that his mother's done some terrible things, and he's tired of constantly being reminded that he is anything like the woman that gave birth to him. Or however the human, however he was formed, I guess technically. So, Pearl suggests that they go to a place called the Reef. The Reef is, what we find out, is where some pearls were made and they can be repaired and have like luxurious spa time or whatever. We learn more about volleyball, about Pink throwing tantrums, and Pink would yell to the point that it would shatter walls, kind of like the yell that we see Pink Steven do during the Steven Universe finale in Change Your Mind, when he gets separated when Steven and his gem get separated and it reforms as Steven, and Pink Steven goes through and tells them to stop because they're meant to be together. They are one in the same, essentially two halves of one whole. And then shortly after, we see Steven go through and use that power as well, screaming about how he doesn't want to hear any more about what the terrible person or alien that his mother ended up being. And what his mother had done thousands of years ago, before the rebellion, and before she even came the rose quartz that she was. Because Pearl knows her as someone who kept too many secrets, and Volleyball knows her as somebody that couldn't keep a secret at all. Volleyball shows signs of PTSD during the scene where we see Steven screaming and shattering the walls. The screaming causes the Reef to try and reset the pearls, but then we get the touching scene where Pearl and Volleyball realize what had actually been going on and that they don't have the whole story, because Pearl hadn't known Pink Diamond 8,000 plus years ago whenever her original Pearl was around, and knew her as a very young diamond entity. So they go through They have their mutual respect for each other. They eventually fuse into Pearl Prime or Mega Pearl, which there's an intense sequence where we see this Pearl fusion fighting to get out of the reef, and then they chuck Steven, and Steven ends up using his pink diamond to shut down the reef, and they get away essentially scratch free, and now the pearls have each other. They know what Steven not what Steven had done, but they now have both sides of the story of what Rose / Pink Diamond was originally trying to do, or more of her story from both sides, because obviously they both loved their diamond, but they were the diamond that they loved were essentially two different people, somebody that had gone through some major change over time. On to episode 5. Alright, so we're talking about episode 5, Bluebird. So, in episode 5, Bluebird, we start out by seeing someone is trying to prank Steven. But they're not doing a great job. They tell Steven, put a sign on his back, tell him he smells good. They neatly stack toilet paper on the top of his car, and they replace his juice box with tomato soup. But Steven likes tomato soup, so it's not really like a terrible prank, just some maybe minor inconveniences. But Steven comes home, he sees that there's a new gem having a welcoming party. We go through, we get introduced to this new gem or hybrid fusion that is happening, and it's obviously, they show us, so we know, everybody knows, almost immediately when it happens, it is going to be Eyeball and Aquamarine, who have fused together to become Bluebird. Eyeball being one of the Ruby soldiers that was sent down to fight Steven or recapture Peridot during the original series. And the gems are trying to give Bluebird a chance. They're trying to be nice because, Stevens went through, sent out this whole message saying that all gems are welcome. Just bring them to Earth, come to Earth, learn how to be an Earthling. We're not going to be super upset about you going through and, you can reform, you can be better. We saw in the first episode he was trying to help Jasper, so why can't we help Bluebird as well? Being Eyeball and Aquamarine. But they're keeping their eye on Bluebird because Steven, he's pretty weary about Bluebird and not wanting to necessarily give them a chance. He's pretty on edge about it. Soon, we see Bluebird hanging out with everybody, and then we see him hanging out with Steven's dad. That's one of the last things that happens. So okay, you know what? Maybe Bluebird's not so bad. Whatever. Steven sees Bluebird being nice to his dad and is, okay, maybe things could be alright. There's a noise, then the van ends up inside of the house. They use the gem warp. Okay, maybe they're just having a wacky time. We hear Steven's dad, Greg, yelling, what is going on? Maybe they're just watching a horror movie because that's what we were doing last night. Nope. He's essentially hostage right now. Bluebird goes off, tries to show this big dramatic reveal that they're Aquamarine and Ruby, Eyeball, showing up because they hate Steven, and they're like, well, here we are, we've come back, and they're like, well, we knew the whole time that it was you two. Like, you're not showing anybody anything new here. We could tell almost instantly with the Eyeball gem and the Teardrop gem that Aquamarine had. It's pretty self-explanatory. We haven't really met any gems with those specific placements before, and none that would have any kind of ill content for Steven. So after the dramatic reveal and they threaten Greg cuts off his hair. Very sad scene. He's had these dreads of this, beautiful locks of hair for as long as the series has been going on, and probably as long as he's been, for a very long time, because when he was like 22, 23, when he first met Rose, he had his gorgeous long hair. So he cuts off his hair. Steven tells him to go inside. Greg runs inside, crying over his hair. He fights Bluebird. The gems come out, see that he's fighting Bluebird. They straight up just turn into Alexandrite. Be like, nope, we're not going to mess around. Smack Bluebird into the ground. During the fight scene, before the gems come out, there is a bit of an issue with Bluebird and Ruby fusing, because they only fuse out of hatred for Steven. That's it. Usually there's other reasons to fuse, and Steven tells them that love and responsibility and all these, good reasons to fuse and become a fusion, but they're like, no, we hate your guts and we're going to fuse. And then Alexandrite comes out. They fuse for responsibility reasons to, help keep Steven safe still or whatever. Bam, smash Bluebird. They separate and they fly off. So they'll always be out there hating you, Steven. Ew, Steven. Alright, so we're on episode 6, a very special episode, but this video is going a little bit longer than I thought it would, so let's try to hurry our way through the last 5 episodes of the first half of the season. So, with a very special episode, number 6, we see Rainbow Quartz spending time with Onion, though Steven has also promised to spend time with Garnet doing a safety seminar, or Geminar as they call it, because, it's a seminar for gems. You got it. He rushes to fuse Sunstone with Garnet so they can go over and have the safety seminar, because Garnet just sees a bunch of possibilities in the future, so he's just telling them all the ways these gems can hurt themselves. Not a great idea. Pearl not having anything under control, so we're going through. He's going back, spending time with Onion as Rainbow Quartz. Onion, pretty crazy, got Steven, locks of Steven's hair and a doll of Steven. Some pretty creepy stuff. But as the episode things keep getting worse for the Geminar and for Onion as the episode goes on. We keep seeing Steven running back and forth, trying to do both duties at the same time. The seminar sequences, like the safety, is actually not bad things that are being taught in that the part of the episode. And of course the whole episode pretty much just sums up that you need to go through and not overbook yourself and overwork yourself, and make sure that you make time for you. And you can't just, go off and do too much at once. Worry about yourself. You. Alright, guys. Episode 7, we're talking about Snow Day, which is kind of a filler episode. We'll go through, we see Steven has this daily routine. It's usually pretty busy on the schedule. He goes through, he's running little homeschool. He's barely got enough time to have a protein shake. He's running off, running some errands before classes even start. We see some snow. Pearl offhandedly mentions, we're going to get snow all night, all day. We go through, we see him wake up the next morning, tries to leave to go to school. Too much snow, cannot leave. So, it's a snow day. Steven goes through, he's trying to sit down with the schedule after he cancels school for the day, trying to figure out what is going on and how he can fix the schedule, essentially. Well, then we get into the main grit of the episode, which is Steven tag, where we go through. Amethyst tries to tag Steven. Steven says, I'm already Steven. How are you gonna play Steven tag? She said, no, you gotta turn into young, classic Steven. So he's off on the run because he doesn't want to play. He's tired of being seen as a little kid. You know, he's got some more stuff going on. So, as we said, Steven or whoever gets tagged, that's turned into Classic Steven. We go through, we get to see Pearl shapeshift for the very first time ever. She gets tagged, very dramatic, and Steven goes, "Ha, joke's on you, Pearl don't shapeshift." And she goes, the power of Steven tag compels me. And she turns into a little tiny Pearl Steven. So we get to see all these different gems be Steven. And Steven's on the run. We even see fusions of... We get to see the gems turn into fusions that also shapeshift into versions of Steven. Ridiculous. And cool at the same time. And each time that we see one of the new fusions... with the Steven, it's Ultimate Steven tag. Basically, it's like an entry title card, a la Super Smash Bros. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Then eventually, it's also very anime-esque episode. By the end of the episode, Steven gets tagged. He kind of refuses. Then we have this semi-meta monologue from Steven saying that he's grown and he can't just be seen as the little kid that he used to be, but that he is a young adult now, and that people need to see him as what he's become and not just who he used to be. Alright guys, getting close to the end here. Episode 8, Why So Blue? We go through, Steven and Lapis are visiting a planet to invite 2 other Lapises to Earth to check out little Homeschool. They're terraforming a planet, so Steven goes through with Lapis and they try to explain that it's wrong and they need to stop, but they've been doing it their whole lives, so how could something they've been doing forever be wrong just all of a sudden? Of course, they got the message that Steven broadcast to everybody that they need to stop. But they try to tell them that, you know, they can do whatever they want, but as long as whatever they want is not destroying a planet. Steven and Lapis try to show the beauty of organic life, and Lapis tries to relate to them, showing that she didn't always see the beauty and majesty that is in organic life because they're gems. They just want to, you know, destroy whatever is left, organic life, and create more gems terraforming planets. They try to show them that they can do... Lapis shows them they can do more with their powers, and how to be creative, trying to show them how to do meat morphs. The Lapises will have none of it, and Lapis is done with them, deciding to fight them, try to get them to stop. Lapis was originally trying to fight him in the first place, saying that, you know, if we would have done things her way, maybe this wouldn't have been such a big issue. She's using up some of her built-up pension from being imprisoned in the mirror, and when she was fused with Jasper, and possibly even back when she was terraforming planets for the diamonds. All this stuff has just been building up for her. She's essentially felt imprisoned for a majority of her existence. She strikes the Lapises. She goes through, creates this huge form out of water, and she's about to strike down the Lapises that she's been fighting, but she looks over at Steven and realizes how much she's grown, and that wouldn't actually be her doing that. She is showing weakness by almost giving in and fighting, but the patience that she has is the real strength, and the fact that she doesn't need to strike them down shows the real strength that she has within. Eventually, the one of the Lapises comes to little Homeschool, but we're not sure. This may be a way for one of them to infiltrate the school so they both can come back later towards the end of the season, because we know that there is going to be a big bad later in the season. Most people think it's going to be the big boy wormy guy, and a lot of people think that it might be a corrupted Steven. That could be, you know, an excellent theory. If you guys are still here, Leave your best finale theories in the section down below. And let's continue on to episode 9. Alright, so episode 9, little graduation. We start out, we finally really get to see Lars again for one of the first times since Steven Universe Future has come back. And Lars owns his own bakery now. He's not afraid to show that who he is. I mean, he's already died and come back to life. He makes a joke about that in this episode where he's afraid that he's going to kill all of his friends. And Lars says, well, it wouldn't be the first time that one of Steven's friends would have, died for him. But we go to the bakery. Steven shows up. He's trying to get the graduation cake for the first graduation, or this graduation. We finally get to see Sadie. Sadie shows up. She comes in. We learn that she's moved on and she's in a new relationship. She's not really with Lars anymore, which was a big on and off again thing during the original series. We weren't really sure how that was ever going to work out. Steven's upset learning about everyone moving on without him, moving on, doing bigger and better things, while he's still kind of, running little homeschool and being a part of the gem stuff day to day. And everybody's just moving away from Beach City, and he's pretty upset about it. He's worried that everything and everyone else acting like he's okay. So trying to push that it's not him that's got the issues, that it's everybody else, but honestly it's him trying to project his problems onto other people so he doesn't feel as responsible. Usually he's dealing with crazier things, like dealing with the diamonds and homeworld and that kind of thing, and he's not used to having to deal with the normal parts of growing up, like people moving away and having these physical distances between you and the people that you grew up and grew close to over time. So, it's interesting to see Steven dealing with the normal day-to-day things. He's always been a fairly relatable character no matter what he's been dealing with, but this is a way the people that have grown up watching the show over the course of the last 4 or 5 years can really relate to Steven more. Now that he's dealing with real issues that just about everybody has to deal with during their lifetime. Sadie and Shep perform a song, Shep being Sadie's new partner. They perform a song together about moving forward and looking forward instead of being in the past. Lars tries to leave, and that's when Steven set off, and he traps him and all of his friends inside this dome, controlled by his powers. Eventually, Shep goes through and talks to him, and Steven realizes that, all of his stuff is emotional based, and that even though he's been trying to project these things onto other people, it's really him that's dealing with all these issues, and that he needs to go through and find a way to, he can still be friends with these people, and he's still got a connection with them, no matter how far away they're going to be, which is sad. It's stuff that everybody's got to deal with, though, and, after dealing with so many hardships, it's just hard for Steven to deal with this now, when he's dealt with so many bigger things over the years. And Steven realizes that maybe it's time for him to move along too, so he makes the decision to move forward and let someone else take over running Little Homeschool, and he's not going to run it anymore. So, we're there. Episode 10. Let's go. So, this is it. The conclusion to the first half of this series, which is going to be, I'm assuming, the end of Steven Universe as a whole, as a show, at least for now. I could see it getting a reboot or something eventually in the future, and, I would, of course, me and others would probably love for Rebecca to come back, and do more with these characters in the universe. We could continue to see, comic books or something that continues the show. But we are here with Prickly Pear, which is a semi filler episode, but if you've watched the episodes, you can notice that there are not really any filler episodes going on in Steven Universe Future. Every episode has an underlying thing going on, usually with Steven, of course, because this is a show about him. We need to be paying attention to him, and maybe we can find out what is going to happen later. This is why a lot of people believe that he is going to corrupt himself with all the stress and trauma that he's been under and become thick boy, big worm guy, whatever that character may eventually be called. But we start the episode, we see that now Steven isn't running little homeschool, that he has got a bustling garden growing in the greenhouse of the temple. Maybe going a bit crazy by naming plants after people that he is no longer seeing as much of, or people that he's growing apart from. This might be foreshadowing of a breakup between him and Connie, as Connie is one of the first flowers that he names during this episode, and the fact that we haven't had a chance to see her at all as a character that actually shows up in an episode so far during the first half of this season. But which is very upsetting because I'm a Connie fan. I would love to see Connie at some point. Stevani, Connie with her sword fighting. Oh my goodness, just something. The gems go through. They see him. Mentioned that it might not be a healthy coping mechanism, realizing that he's naming all these flowers after people. It may not be a great hobby. But Steven goes through. He pricks his finger when he cuts off the top of a cactus, tries to transplant it to grow that cactus in another pot, and he pricks himself, licks his finger, accidentally touches the cactus. Of course, Steven's healing powers. He brings the cactus to life, creating what is soon to be known as Cactus Steven. He goes through and he talks to the cactus. When he first sees it as a little head, trying to get some things off of his chest, which is a fairly good idea. Steven's had a lot of things going on, but this Cactus Steven might not be the first person that he should be going to. We go through, Cactus Steven begins to grow and starts repeating things that Steven is saying, which is not so great. But Steven doesn't feel like he can talk to a whole lot of people, so he just continues telling this Cactus Steven things over and over during the course of the episode. They get more and pretty specific. He keeps telling it more, and he keeps getting fairly specific with things that he's telling these to the cactus. The gems are worried about Steven, as they can see that something is going on, but Steven obviously doesn't want to tell the whole truth about what is going on. He doesn't want to scare anybody. Of course, as time goes on, Cactus Steven is also growing rapidly, eventually escapes. Steven begins to fight Cactus Steven, and it's starting to say some of the things that he's been going through and saying to it over time. He tries to get the gems to stay out of the house so they won't hear anything that he's been saying about them specifically, or how he's been feeling fairly down on himself and whatnot. But they come in, they help him fight it. It continues to just say all these terrible things about high and mighty advice that he's getting from Garnet, about how Pearl's just going to go through and blame herself about things, and that Amethyst is so mature now, which a lot of the gems, they're not sure how to take it, and they eventually defeat Cactus Steven by Steven realizing that the cactus is just repeating and doing everything he's doing. So he throws down his shield, and he gives the cactus a hug. Terrible idea because it's a cactus. But the cactus realizes, it doesn't need to fight. And the cactus escapes, runs away. And that's one of the last things that happens in this episode. The gems ask Steven if he needs to talk. And he feels like he's said quite enough. Not necessarily directly to them, but in a way, they know what he's said, so he doesn't feel like he needs to say anything anymore. And that's where this ends off with for us right now. We're going to go see tonight when the new episode comes out. We will see where this leads, what is the next trial and tribulation for Steven Universe. Let me know what you're excited for down below, along with everything else. I've told you to comment below, like the video if you're still here, and appreciate the recap that I did for you guys. And subscribe for more Steven Universe videos. We'll be doing episode videos every week as episodes come out. And I got some other geeky stuff we're going to talk about here in the future. And remember, some of us are just born geeky. You have a good one.